me ask John that. Let me ask John.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The cloud was correct.
Perfect. So I guess I got 3:30 on my end. Mindy, you good for us to go ahead and start?
Yes, you may begin.
All right. Well, thank you for those guys that have joined us here today. For those guys that don't know me, my name is Buddy Haas. I'm currently an ag teacher and FFA advisor at Central Burlington High School up in Section 6, District 2. And I'm also the Eastern Region representative on the National FFA National Chapter Award Committee at Nationals there in Indianapolis. So today's goal is we're going to talk about how to accurately judge the National Chapter Award here for Illinois. So there is a lot of information that we're going to go over, and this PowerPoint will be shared as well as some of the supporting materials that are in there as well to be able to help you through your judging process. But as always, my email will be at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask myself or Mindy there for any questions that you have. So again, the goal of the National Chapter Award program and what we're doing here is to review and score all applications. The biggest thing is being fair and consistent in the process, making sure that you're not letting any bias that you might have or potentially have, but just judging each application and each activity independently. And so when we're actually saying score them each application independently, it's, we're going to read the activity description and give a score for that, then go to the goal. And it's not necessarily an overall aesthetic appeal, it's each individual section of the activity itself there. Our task is that we're going to have each judge score 3 different activities or 3 activities themselves. And so typically speaking, you're going to be doing like, this is poorly worded here, but growing leaders activity 1, and you'll do all the growing leaders activity 1, building communities activity 3, or whatever you are assigned by Mindy and John there. And again, for regardless if you're doing round 1 or round 2, our goal is to be able to provide an actual score for that whole process there. So we'll be getting out information, and you'll be getting a link sent to you with a code to be able to say, these are the applications that you are going to judge, and it'll be done all electronically on AET. But the nice part about it is basically by the time we are done, roughly 27 judges would have looked at each application to be able to give our finalized score for those chapters in our National Chapter Award program. A couple things to kind of keep in mind, which I think have been overlooked in the past, or just things to keep in mind there. Our National Chapter Award program does rank chapters in terms of gold, silver, bronze, and superior chapters. And there is no true limit to the number of gold chapters that we have. And again, you're scoring the application on its own merit. Each chapter deserves equal consideration, and so just remaining objective when you're judging each of those activities that you have there. And then as you are judging, it's just a good rule of thumb to remember that results and any of the applications that you see should not be shared, and the results aren't official until they're verified by the state staff and officially announced at convention. So that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind there. Some of the things that you will notice, or what I definitely consider to be beneficial or helpful in the judging process, is making sure that we're able to follow the rubric as well as the quality standard indicators. So we're going to go into a little bit more in depth about each different area of the rubric as we go through our different activities here. And so that way we can get a better understanding of it. Again, the rubric is linked here on the presentation that will be shared out with you guys. It will also be, it's available through the National FFA website, so ffa.org. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen there, select National Chapter Award, and then under rubrics and resources, you can find the most up-to-date rubric there. One of the interesting things is that you can give partial points, but just make sure you're following the score sheets. And so just for your guys' reference here, if we take a look at the rubric itself, which should load here shortly. Okay, so every activity is broken down into a high point range, a midpoint range, or a no points or low points range. And so making sure when you're going to read through each of the different individual areas, are you scoring it?
Who's your Jeff Peterson or Flory?
Okay, so if you are scoring the activity description, okay, the idea of does it fall in the high points area, mid points, and no points. So the goal of this kind of workshop here today is just to kind of get our eyes set to what a high point activity description, goal, impact is going to be, a midpoint or a no or a low point area is. And again, each point value for each area is going to be different. So even though it says high points here for activity description is 2 points, it's multiplied by a factor of 2.5. So it's actually a total of 5 points there. So a perfect score for an activity description would be a 5 out of 5, which you can all put in AET individually there. Okay, can you guys still see the presentation right now based on slides? Thank you, Greg, I appreciate that. The biggest thing that I had overcome the first time I judged is I got the rubric stuck in my head and I'd sit there and just try to overanalyze the idea of is this truly clear of what they're saying, or is this super vague on what it's going with? The biggest piece of advice I can give you is just go with your gut. As long as you're staying true and consistent with what you're marking as a high range, mid range, or a low range on the rubric side of it, you are perfectly fine there. And the big goal right here is that we're trying to look for ways to award points to students, not deduct points from students. So if the information is there, the students earn the points on their application there. And the biggest piece of advice I can give everyone there is that you'll see as you're judging different types of formats that each chapter or application might have. And so one thing to keep in mind is just because they use a format, which we'll talk about here in a little bit more, it doesn't mean that it's going to score high points, which we'll talk specifically more in the plan of actions and things like that. So when we're starting to look at it, again, the point ranges are the big part of it. You guys can kind of ignore the yeses and nos for now, but the idea is that high points, mid points, and low points. And so the idea is we want to just make sure that we're consistent as we are judging through there. Okay. The goal of the National Chapter Award is that if you were to give anyone the activity from Form 2, so the idea you gave them the entire activity from activity description all the way through the photo caption, that another chapter could replicate that event based on the information that they were provided there. So if you're kind of reading each application or activity and you're like, oh, this kind of makes sense, and I can follow their thought process, what they're doing, that would be an example of a really well-written application there. So this is where we're going to kind of jump into the actual rubric side of things to kind of see how we're going. So I do have the chat box function open up on my side screen here. So if you guys want to be able to type in scores or ask any questions at any time, don't hesitate to do so. So right now, the activity description, this is copy and pasted from the National FFA rubric itself. So description clearly explains the purpose and the reason why, or the reason why the chapter is implementing the activity. Description clearly answers the following questions. Okay, so what is the purpose of activity and why is the activity taking place? So the purpose of activity is what are they doing? And the why is what inspired the event to take place. So these are some examples that we won't kind of go through all of them, but the idea is these are examples provided by National FFA. So an activity description that would be deeming of a high point area, so 4 to 5 points, would be an example of FFA members notice discouragement or discouraging their peers and others struggling with self-esteem. Operation Beautiful is designed to promote and improve mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits of members. Members are encouraged to pay it forward through positive message boards, random act of kindness, and thank you notes. So this first sentence here for me, reading it saying FFA members notice students discouraging their peers and others struggling with self-esteem is the reason why they are doing the activity. And then this next sentence here is the purpose, designed to promote and improve mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits there. One thing that you might see or potentially see more in common of is the low points or no points area, where it's saying Operation Beautiful was a series of events used to promote positive things to our members. Okay, we don't really see a why. We don't really see, we can kind of see a general super vague purpose of promoting positivity, but what do we actually, what's the overall purpose of that activity there? So this is a first example here. So here is a healthy lifestyles example. And what I'd like to be able to do, those of you guys online, go ahead and kind of just tell me, would you assign this as a high points, mid points, or low points? So the healthy lifestyles activity is FFA officers came up with the idea of an Ag Olympics during National Buffet Week for the junior high students. All activities were agricultural based and made all members of the team compete in each event. 5 events took place with 5 teams competing. Each events consisted of sheep herding, barn fire, tug of war, egg gathering, and hungry heifer. So I'll give you guys 10, 15 seconds to go ahead and type in the chat what you think would be high, medium, or low points, or high, mid, or low points. We're bringing back the remote teaching days with the camera here, waiting for the chats. So far coming in, I do see some people saying high points and some people saying midpoints here. And so this is one example. I think that when we start looking at it, this would be an example of an activity description on the midpoint side towards the low end of the midpoint side, leaning towards even a low point score. The reason being here is it's kind of hard for me to say why are they doing this activity. Okay, the reason why here is they just came up with the idea during National FFA Week. Okay, so is that really the only reason why they're just doing this activity? The second and the bigger one is the true purpose of it. So it says that we're doing an Ag Olympics and we're doing activities that were agriculture based and teams to compete in each event. What is the purpose of doing an Ag Olympics? So does the purpose meet the why? So this is why it'd be an example for me. I lean more towards the low end of points or the low mid range. So this is kind of an example too of one that you can write a lot, but what is it actually telling us? So this is kind of like for me, when a kid gives a presentation, just a lot of kind of like word vomit coming out. We weren't super precise in terms of what we're talking about here. So I can't really tell what the why is. I can't really tell the true genuine purpose, but I can tell that they did 5 events in there. So that's why I'm saying the low end of the midpoint range there. Okay, here's a second one. So it's a human resources activity. It says, why with a growing demographic of students with special needs, there were no inclusive extracurricular outlets for these students. Purpose of activity, to create a platform that promotes inclusion and positivity for students with special needs by connecting our student body through empowering individualized expression fueled by music and dance. Based on that activity description, go ahead and type in if you think it's a high, mid, or low point score in the chat. Okay, so again, seeing some of the chats come in here, and I appreciate you guys divulging with me in this little activity. So this would be an example of an activity that would score in the high end for the activity description. The reason why we'd say high, so the reason why I say this is if you took out the capitalized Y and the capitalized purpose of activity, which is one of those formatting things that we'll talk about, you'll see as you judge the activity there. We can see that the reason why they're doing this activity is because there's a growing demographic of students with special needs, because there is no inclusive extracurricular outlets for students. So because the special needs students didn't have anything to do outside of school. And then when looking at it, we have the idea that the purpose of the activity is to create that platform to promote inclusivity and positivity for students with special needs. So it does show us a purpose and a why. Now, granted, for this little snippet of it, you can't see like the name of the activity or like 100% what they're doing, but I can tell that we're doing something with music and dance. And that's the idea that we have a why and we have a purpose. So because of that, this should score in a high range of the activity description there. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Appreciate that there as well. SMART goals is one that gets interesting. So you'll see 3 SMART goals for each activity that you see there. And the key for a SMART goal is that they are SMART. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. The most common mistake or most common thing that you'll see is that we'll forget something that is measurable or forget something that is timely there. So an example of a high points SMART goal, FFA members will post 600 positive messages around the Ag building to help promote positive self-esteem by January 31st, 2022. Okay, so the idea is that I can see that the FFA members are in charge of it. We're going to measure 600 positive messages. We know where it's going to happen. We have a date that's going to be completed by, and I would say like, depending on the size of the chapter, it's probably realistic for them to be able to write 600 positive messages, and it's probably as attainable for them as well. Where again, if you look at the midpoint range, FFA members will post messages around the Ag building to help promote positive self-esteem. So we know kind of what they're doing, but we don't really see what they're measuring. We don't really see a timeline by it, but we just know more of like a who and a where and kind of what they're doing. But we don't see a measurable or a timely activity. And for the low points, FFA members will post positive messages. Okay, we're not really knowing where they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it by, or how many. So high, mid, and low. So this activity here, one that kind of practice here is about a slow moving vehicle event under the safety category. So one of the goals were FFA officers blank and blank will contact local farmers and co-ops in order to obtain one farming implement to be delivered and parked at the high school for the event attendees to sit in and visualize blind spots by April 6th. So go ahead and type in the chat if you think that'd be high points, mid points, or low points. Greg, you're the fast one to respond. I love it. Okay. So far by seeing coming in here, the first couple of results were the ones I'd agree with the most. So this would be an example of a high point range. And so the one part with this activity that I could argue could maybe go, or the goal could go down to the mid range, is what is actually being measured. And so that could be an idea of looking at the outcomes and the exceeded part of it to make sure that you're correct. But I can see in the middle of it here, I know these two FFA officers are going to do it. What they're going to do is they're going to contact local farmers and co-ops, and what they're measuring is getting one farming implement. So the idea is that they're giving me a number of how many farming implements that we're going to get. So to me, that's measurable. It's realistic and attainable. And then the idea is that we're giving a time. So by April 6th, we're going to get that done. So do we need everything else in this sentence about where it's going to be parked and stuff at the high school? Not necessarily, but I know who's going to do it, what's going to happen. We're measuring something. And we have a timeline at the end of it there. So this would be an example of a high point range for a goal written in the application. The next example here, okay, is a healthy lifestyles again for an Ag Olympics activity. So the goal to promote being healthy and fit by competing in a rigorous team event. These events are somewhat challenging and can be rigorous in nature. Okay, is that high, medium, or low points? Okay, and again, as we see the chats coming in here, we're all in agreement here. This would definitely be one for the low point value here. Just because when we're looking at it, we don't really know who's in charge of it. We don't really know what's being measured. There's no time with it. This is just kind of more of a general vague statement of what they want to do. And so we don't really know how it's going to be measured, attainable, realistic, and timely there. So this would be an example of a low point category there for the scoring. Plan of action, this one right here, ladies and gents, for me is probably going to be the one where there's the most discrepancies in terms of formatting and how things will be worded or how they will look. So we'll kind of go over all those different parts of what you might see when you're judging applications. So the plan of action needs to cover 5 different things here. So what needs to be accomplished to meet the goal? Where will the activity take place? How is the chapter going to implement the goal to accomplish the activity? How will the goal be accomplished? And who will perform the duties to meet the goal. So it's kind of like the who, what, where, and how. So there are 3 major different styles that are typically presented in Illinois as well as across the country in terms of how they write the plan of action. But the goal is this. When you're reading the plan of action, it should give you a step-by-step idea of how they're going to accomplish that goal. So if you read the plan of action after reading the goal, you should be like, okay, if I follow this, I'm going to be able to accomplish that goal that this chapter set there. And so again, don't let the formatting that you see there change your viewpoint of what the point values are. Because again, if the information is there, award the points for the kids. So these 2 examples here are kind of examples of high point categories. So I'm going to show you all high point examples. Again, kind of you can decide where the range is. But the idea is this is going back to Operation Beautiful, where we're writing the 600 positive notes for kids in the ag building. So it's saying on January 8th, 2019, the Healthy Lifestyles Committee members will meet to make a display poster and write 600 positive messages on individual Post-it notes. Notes will be placed on the Operation Beautiful display area in the ag building, high school, and middle school, January 21st to the 25th, 2019. Okay, so this one here is probably a little bit, is one of the common ways that we'll see things in Illinois, where it's kind of written as a paragraph format and you have to do a little bit of interpretation. So I'm saying, I know when it's going to take place, January 8th. I know who's going to do it, the Healthy Lifestyles Committee members. What they're doing are making a display poster in order to write the 600 positive message on it with the individual Post-it notes. Okay, how they're going to accomplish it, they're going to place that board in the ag building, high school and middle school area. And again, they're saying by the time of January 21st to the 25th. So the challenging part with this one is like, do you believe that by reading that, do you see the how accomplish and how implement? But for the most part, all the information that we needed there is there. And so then the idea is that we can now see that would be in the high point range here. Basically, the second style here is the exact same as the initial style there, except what this chapter decided to do is add in parentheses towards the end of each deal, saying who, how, what, when, and where, and what they're doing. So hopefully it can make it stand out a little bit better. So then the question becomes, when you see a format like this, is the healthy lifestyle community members the true who? Is the meeting or will meet to make the display poster and write the how, and the 600 positive notes and individual post-it notes is the what there. So this might be another format that you might see there. But again, reading it, I do see the information that is necessary to be in the high range of the plan of actions area. This is another style that you'll see in the state of Illinois and again across the country here, is instead of having a paragraph format, it is listed out. So it says who, what, how, when, and where. So again, it still has all the necessary information that I need to be able to score in the high points area, but just it's not written in a flowing paragraph format there. So typically speaking, if you see something like this, again, ask yourself, is the information there? And then there's other areas in the rubrics that you can make decisions on based on your own personal preference there. But I see who's doing it, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, when and where. And again, when is one of those things that doesn't necessarily have to be there on your plan of action because it's not in the rubric, but you'll see that happen in most of the activity or the plans of actions that you'll see reading them in the contest here. So long story short, we're not going to go through all these different examples here, but comparing the high points to the midpoints, you'll just kind of see that there's a little bit less written. And then when we start looking at it, we're going to be missing some things on like the hows or the what's of what we're going to be actually able to do there. It's just a little bit more vague in general. So the idea is high points, I can follow those descriptions to accomplish the goal. Midpoints is just kind of like they're vague. I get an idea of where you're going, but not really sure. Low points, I could not give that to a student or a person that doesn't know what's going on to accomplish the goal. So the members will work on Operation Beautiful. Notes will be placed on the board in the ag building. Well, that doesn't really tell me how you're going to get those 600 positive notes posted around the school there. So that's kind of the big rule of thumb that I follow. High points is going to be the idea after reading it. You can give that plan of action to anyone. They'll be able to accomplish that goal. Midpoints is kind of vague, but you can get to the point of it. And low points is I couldn't give that to someone and expect to get the result that I'd like there. So here's an example of a plan of action. So the goal for this plan of action is to have officers evaluate their personal goals at the end of the year with new officers to see if they accomplish their goals. So the plan of action itself is at the last officer meeting before the chapter meeting to elect the new officer team. Students will go over their original goal sheet completed a year before. The officers will share with the group each of their goals and if they attain them. They are also encouraged to speak about how easy or how hard it was to attain their goals. So based on that goal and that plan of action, what score range would you give for the plan of action there? High, mid, or low points? Mr. Webb coming in clutch there. Okay. This is definitely one that I would say be the midpoint range. Again, this is an example of just a plan of action that's super vague. Typically speaking, if the, like even reading like the goal part of it, the goal itself is vague. And so the idea is like 9 times out of 10 when you're reading it, it's going to be hard to have a super specific plan of action if your goal is super vague in itself there. But this would be a midpoint range where we can kind of justify that the new officer teams or students are the who. What they're going to do is go over the original goal. Talking about what they're going to do there might be the how. It's just a super vague general plan of action there as well. Okay. Outcome evaluated and reported. So for each goal, again, you'll have one goal, you have a plan of action, and then an outcome of that there. So for the outcome evaluated and reported, the responses state whether the goal was unmet, met, or exceeded. And the point value does not change or should not be hindered if a goal was unmet versus met versus exceeded. The point value should still, again, be consistent with what the rubric's asking you to do. So what they're saying is if all aspects of the SMART goal were met, it states or if it's met, it states that all aspects of the SMART goal were met. If it's exceeded, it states by how much it exceeded. And if the goal was unmet, it should state the circumstances or reasoning why it was unmet and what you would do differently next time to meet the goal. So most of the time you will see goals in our application, the outcomes say that they're either met or exceeded. Occasionally you'll see an unmet goal. Just because it's unmet doesn't mean that it should get a 0 point value. If it's unmet, it just needs to say the reason why it was unmet and what are they going to do differently to meet their goal next time. And same thing if it's exceeded, it should say how much it exceeded that goal by. So for example here, the goal 1, they exceeded the goal because bulletin boards in the school were used to display notes for students to take. Over 650 notes were written and shared. So our original goal was 600 notes. And this is telling us that we had 650 notes posted. Okay, so that'd be in the low end of the high range for the high points there. An example for the low point end, we said we exceeded it, but bulletin boards were used to display positive notes. So that actually doesn't tell us how we exceeded our original goal of having 600 positive notes there. Okay, I don't really have any examples here for you for the outcome part of it because each of them is going to be individualized there as well. This new part here is going to be an update from last year. So if you're judging National Chapter Awards last year, there has been an update to the rubric. So if you have a copy of the rubric from last year, make sure that you use the most advanced or up-to-date one, which again will be linked in this PowerPoint, shared out with everyone there, or can be found on FFA.org if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page and click on National Chapter Awards. So for the advancing area, so if you're in growing leaders, it's advancing leaders. If you're in building communities, it's advancing communities. If you're in strengthening agriculture, it's advancing agriculture. But the goal of this area is the response clearly states the purpose of the activity and the benefit the activity had on either the leaders, the community, or agriculture. And what's been added this year is that using qualitative data in the advancing area. So the goal of this, adding the qualitative data part of it, it was being able to make sure that chapters are using the summary portion, which the advancing is part of, to be able to explain a little bit more and brag about what their chapter is able to do. So we're using qualitative data in the advancing area here. So the high point range, the purpose of Operation Beautiful was for members to learn about why positive character traits are important and how powerful pay it forward actions can be. The activity advanced leaders by encouraging improvement in the mental well-being and self-esteem of our members. However, our chapter and community were also affected due to the positive pay it forward activities members conducted. So I can be able to look at this and say, I can see the purpose, okay, to learn about why positive character traits are important. The benefit was the encouraging improvement in the mental well-being and self-esteem of people there. And then the idea of the paying it forward or the chapter community was affected due to the positive pay it forward activities. That's the qualitative side, giving us a little bit of a story behind what they did there. Again, on the opposite end, low points, members felt better about themselves because they advanced leaders. That doesn't really tell us the purpose. It doesn't really tell us how the benefit affected the leaders, community, or agriculture based on the area you're in. And I don't really see a story using qualitative data there. So this is an example of a advancing area there. So it's for building communities and human resources. So again, after we read this, go ahead in the chat and tell me if you think it'd be high points, mid points, or low points. So the purpose of this activity was to give our chapter an opportunity to give back through community service around our area. It benefited the community by having relief packages ready to be sent out to those in need of nourishment. Some of those food packages were shipped to a community nearby, which was suffering from a flooding problem. We were happy to do our small part in helping meet their needs. So reading that, what do you guys think the score would be? Okay, I'm seeing some midpoints there, and that's definitely where I would lean towards. The only reason I would say like midpoints and probably towards the lower end of the midpoint range is just because, again, this was an example used in previous years, but the idea is that the true story of the full-blown impact using qualitative data is not necessarily there, but I am able to see the purpose of the activity, the opportunity to give back through community service around our area. this to me is kind of a vague purpose, just because we're in the human resources area. It should be talking more about the welfare and well-being of the community, but it benefited by having relief packages ready to be sent out to those in need of nourishment. So by providing nourishment to those people in the community, we are providing relief. So that is a good benefit there, and would add a little bit of story there. So this would be an example of a midpoint point value there. Impact is the other thing that has changed or improved from last year to this year. So for the impact area, the summary, it says responses clearly identifies and describes how the impact of the activity affected the intended audience using quantitative data. And so the big change here is that we added the quantitative data to the impact side. So as you're reading the impact, can you identify who the intended audience is? And is it describing how the impact of the activity affected them using quantitative data? So high points, and when we're starting to look at it, our members' actions truly made a large impact on each other, our school atmosphere, and our community. Community members enjoyed being recognized for their support and appreciated being on the receiving end of kind actions. Many members continued to pay it forward. Okay. This is one that gets interesting because we just add a little question mark there this year, because this one is actually on the high midpoint range to the low high point range, because we don't actually see the use of quantitative data in the impact here. And the idea of we can see our community members are our intended audience. They enjoyed being recognized for their support and being appreciated. But again, the true impact of it, do we see how it clearly identifies and describes how the impact of the activity affected the intended audience? This is one that would be leaning towards the high mid range there. So being able to give us some actual quantifiable numbers to be able to help us figure out the impact would be beneficial there. Where versus on the low point end range, members' actions made an impact on each other and lots of other people. Okay, so here's an impact for us to practice. So everyone notices and comments on how much nicer the billboard is than how it was. It was one of the things that welcomes you to our community. We feel that it also thanks our community for all it has done to support the FFA. 27 members and 4 volunteers have helped with the billboard effort. So go ahead in the chat box, tell me high, mid, or low points. Okay, 100% seeing what we got coming in here. I'm definitely agreeing with the midpoint range. And this would be an example of probably mid on the low end of the range there, but as long as you're in the midpoint range, that's the goal there. I do see some quantifiable numbers. We have 27 members and volunteers that are helping us there. And we're talking about how everyone notices and comments on how much nicer the billboard is. So I can say that might be a benefit on our community. The hard part is like, who is the true intended audience here? Is it the community? Is it the people that are supporting the FFA? That just kind of gets a little bit more vague in terms of who is actually being impacted by this billboard here. But again, as you're reading activities, it does help to be able to see the whole picture of the activity itself rather than just a simple snippet here that we clipped out of a application there. Okay, we got a couple more left of being able to look through our areas here. So on each application, there should be a quality standard marked, and it should also identify the purpose of the quality standard. So you can see multiples of different areas there. But again, each area, growing leaders, building communities, and strengthening ag, have 5 quality standards. Each activity has to meet 1 there. And so there is linked on this document here, which you guys should be able to see here. And it'll also be shared out, as well as it'll be on AET when you're going through the judging process there, but a description of each quality standard. So in growing leaders, if you have a leadership activity, those should be activities that help the individual develop technical human relations and decision-making skills to grow leaders. And based on whatever activity quality standard is matched, you should be able to find that quality standard and make sure that activity is matching that quality standard there. So an example of high points for a quality standard, this one was for healthy lifestyles. So healthy lifestyles were encouraged through Operation Beautiful as students intentionally promoted confident mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits. So when we actually look at the healthy lifestyles quality indicator, it talks about how the activity should be focused on positively promoting and improving the mental and physical well-being of the intended audience there. So because it's saying that we are intentionally trying to improve the mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits, that is how it relates directly to that quality standard there. Versus a low point area, Operation Beautiful encourages healthy lifestyles. It doesn't necessarily tell us how that activity or the purpose or how the activity and the benefits directly relate to that quality standard there. Okay, so that's going to be 1, 2. Then we're looking at quality standard part of it. It's 4 points. Again, being able to say like, is it high, mid, or low points there? Again, I always use my rule of thumb, going back to the quality indicators and the program of activities. Make sure that you're checking the boxes of what is that actual goal of that quality standard there. And we'll talk a little bit more about quality standards here in a little bit. The last 2, or we got 3 more parts of the rubric here, is the photo and the photo caption, and then grammar and spelling after it. So for the photo itself, the goal is that the photo should be a clear, high quality photo that illustrates the chapter's activity in action being displayed. It should be interesting and informative. And the big goal is that there do not repeat photos within the application. So as I judge applications or activities, my goal is I kind of have this mental image of what that activity looks like based on the goals and the descriptions, the impacts and the advancing leaders or communities in agriculture section. And my goal is like, does that picture match what my mental image was? Or does that picture kind of add on to the story of it and tell us what we are telling you there? Okay, thank you, Greg. We'll see you later there. A couple things to kind of remember there is that if you happen to see any photo collages, those are not allowed. Those will be awarded 0 points. Then screenshotted social media posts or just screenshotted photos there will also receive 0 points there. So this one has been kind of challenging with COVID times. So the idea is that we can have what's been recommended from nationals is that if you did like a Zoom or a Google Meets activity, you can take like a picture of the screen of everyone on the Google Meet. But if you're saying like you're screenshotting a Facebook post, for example, that doesn't show the true scope of the activity there. So that would be one that would receive 0 points there. If you're screenshotting like a kid had a Snapchat and while they're at the activity and you're screenshotting the Snapchat, that would be an example of a screenshotted social media post. And that again would receive 0 points there. If at any times that you believe that there's discrepancies with that, do not hesitate to email a question and we'll be able to help take a look at that there as well. So this is an example of a picture here. So you can kind of tell in the background here, these are kids that went to the Northern Illinois Food Bank. And so based on this picture here, this is one that I would probably award into the midpoint areas here. The activities talking about going to the food bank, helping those out. I can see that they're at the food bank, but this is just kind of like a stage photo of kids getting ready to go to the activity, but are they really doing anything? That's like an action shot in the picture, and the answer is no. So this would be an example of a midpoint value photo here. This is a picture for an SMV activity. So I can kind of see in this picture here, I have kids kind of standing around. I see a tractor in the background. I can see a car packed behind it or back behind it here. It's a little bit of idea that we can see, like reading the activity. It was the idea of kids getting into a car and getting into a tractor and visualizing blind spots. So this would be an example of a high point range there. Okay, question in the chat is, what if the activity was to post cooking videos on social media to promote healthy lifestyle? It was a virtual activity used on social media as a platform. So that is an activity or a example of a photo that will be up to like your interpretation of what's happening there. So if the photo is of the kid on the computer posting the cooking videos to the social media website, that would be a photo that would be perfectly fine. If the photo that is being presented to it is just like let's say a screenshot of the photo playing on Facebook, that is one that they have advised us from nationals to not award high points to it there, just because those types of photos don't show the kids in action doing what they're doing. We do realize that with the times that we are in, it's definitely been very restrictive and challenging there. And so I'll be using the judge's perspective on it. But the rule of thumb previously before COVID and hopefully moving forward is that we're going to try to limit the number of screenshotted photos that we can have there. But hopefully that makes sense there, and just kind of use your best judgment for what you see. And if you come across a question like that as you judge, again, don't hesitate to shoot an email and ask there. For the photo caption itself, I do have a couple examples here, and we'll kind of keep it short and sweet to the point, so that way we can make sure that you guys are using your time wisely here. The big goal with the photo caption, and the most common mistake that people have, is that they'll just type in the photo caption saying pictured above is Johnny, Sarah, and whatever doing this activity. But the photo caption per the rubric of the National Chapter Award says that the photo caption should be able to describe the activity and what's taking place, as well as the picture that's being there. So this photo caption was actually for the picture that we just previously saw. So SMV, slow down, move over, and visualize, is an event designed to teach the upcoming generation of motorists and driver's education and intro to ag classes at CHS to the importance of safely sharing the road with farming implements during planting and harvest season. So that sentence tells me the purpose of the activity, and pictured above is one group of students taking turns drawing the blind spots found sitting in the tractor versus sitting in the car following it. This activity helps students understand that farmers may not see them when they are following farmers and how to address this issue. So the goal with the photo caption that we should see is that Nationals wants to be able to take that photo and that caption itself, put it on their social media or put it in the New Horizons magazine. And basically from that picture and caption alone, people get a full rounded picture of what the activity was and what was happening there. Versus this photo caption here, pictured above is a group of students sitting in a tractor and looking at a car and the tractor from the outside. Students had a great time learning how to be safe on the roads. Okay, this would be an example of a low point value photo caption, just because it's really just kind of describing the picture. It vaguely talks about the purpose of the activity there. So the only part about the purpose would be students had a great time learning how to be safe on the roads. Well, based on that picture in the description, I can't really tell what they did to figure out how to be safe on the roads there. And the last part of the rubric is spelling and grammar. So the idea is that 2 points is full points for the activity there. So there's no errors or slight errors. Okay, it was not hard or difficult to read. You award full points for 2 points there. Major errors is the idea it's difficult to follow and didn't make grammatical sense. That'd be 1 point. Excessive errors, like to the point where you really had no idea what was going on, that would be 0 points there. So the challenging part again is up to your own interpretation of what no errors or slight errors, major and excessive errors are. Again, understand that high school students are writing these, but the idea is use your best judgment there. So I always kind of use the rule of thumb of what was in the parentheses there. Okay, it was not hard or difficult to read, I award full points. If it's difficult to follow or kind of didn't really make sense here or there, okay, that'd be a major errors would be 1 point or the midpoint value. Or I really could not figure out what was going on, that'd be excessive errors, and you'd award 0 points for that activity there. Questions on the rubric so far, ladies and gents? Awesomeness. So that whole part that we just talked about is the idea of the major judging process that you will be taking place through the National Chapter Award. So each of those different slides was each of the different individual areas for the activities that you'll look at while you're judging either round 1 or round 2. And again, the goal is this PowerPoint will be shared with you guys so you can have a better idea of what should be high points, mid points, and low points for those activities there. The second thing that we're asking you to do as judges is to flag activities for potential deductions. And so the deductions that are allowable or noticeable are created by the National FFA for the National Chapter Award Program are the following 5. So not related to the quality standard, a replication of the activity within the application, activity date out of range, multiple activities in one, collaborative activity replication. And so for each deduction that is present, it's 25 points off the total score of that application there. The 3 that are highlighted in red are going to be the 3 that you'll probably, if there is going to be a deduction, are more than likely the ones that you will see. And we'll go through what they mean. So again, the not related to quality standard, activity date out of range, and multiple activities in one are the most popular ones. For our judging purposes here in Illinois, it'll be a little bit more challenging to find the replication of activity within an application because you're only going to read one activity out of the application there. Or collaborative activity replication, that means that if you're judging growing leaders leadership and another from one chapter and another chapter has growing leaders leadership and they're the exact same activity that they work together with and it's like copy and pasted, that would be a collaborative activity replication there. So multiple activities in one. This one is fairly common for most chapters. The most common way of seeing it is that this is for a leadership example where goal 1 is saying we're going to have at least 10 FFA members attend national convention. Goal 2 is we're going to have 8 members attend and compete at the 2019 state leadership contest or CDEs. And goal 3 is to have 3 chapter officers attend state leadership camp in July of 2019. Okay, again, so each goal is basically its own activity. This would be an example of multiple activities in one. You might also see one where it's like students are going to go to 212, WLC, state convention, national convention, and whatever. Whenever we get to like the listing side of it of activities, and each goal is about a different activity there, that should be the idea of multiple activities in one. So if you're ever come across the idea of a goal could be its own activity in itself, and its second goal is not related to the first goal or the overall activity description, those will constitute multiple activities in one. Okay, another example would be the idea of, here's for personal growth. Okay, have 100% of chapter members involved on a chapter committee over the 2017 FFA year, compete in a career development event in 2016, or have completed records, completing proficiencies at state convention in 2016. Okay, train and have at least 25% of our school members compete in a spring CDE at or above the state level in March to April of 2017. Goal 3, have all members accurately and thoroughly fill out the record books on computers and ag classes. So right here, we're talking about doing CDEs, we're talking about doing proficiencies and going to state convention. Now we're talking about going to spring CDEs and involvement here, and then doing record books here as well. So proficiencies and SAEs and CDEs are all 3 different things, and all those are going to be considered multiple activities in one. And again, if you see that, you'll flag it on AET, which we'll talk about here in a second. Second most common deduction that you might see is activity date out of range. So the biggest tip that I can give you is the idea that when you're looking at activity date out of range is on the very first page of every application, each chapter gets to select their own start and end date. So every chapter could be something different. What I always do is I take a Post-it note and I'll write down before I read an application, I'll say April 1, 2021 to March 30th, 2022, or July 1st to June 30th. So that way I know while I'm reading that application, what their activity date lines are. For an activity date to be considered out of range, the biggest thing is the activity itself has to happen during that date period, but planning that activity can take place outside of that date range. So the idea is you could have a really big activity that say you wanted, like my activity date range was April to March, and I wanted to get this activity done in, let's say June. Well, I started planning it in the January before that April deal, but we still accomplished the activity in June in between that April and March. That activity would be perfectly fine, even though the planning took place outside of the date range there. The most common issue that we do see, though, is that chapters sometimes copy and paste their applications from previous years, and they don't change the years. So like I've been judging some activities even last year at the national side of it, where I see the year 2017 in it, just like this application here that we've seen. Okay, this would also be an example of activity date out of range for the multiple times talking about 2017 and 2016 and 2019 there. But making sure that the years match the year of the application. And then sometimes it could be an interesting deal. You might see someone say like their activity is taking place during the 2021-22 school year, but their activity dates on their activity are January 1 to December 31st. Well, the calendar date for the school year of 21-22 is August to June. And so the idea becomes, depending on how that activity is worded and how it's written, that could potentially be an activity date out of range if they're truly talking about the entire school year, but then they're starting it as a calendar year type part of it there. So those are just some common things to be on the lookout for activity date out of range. The most common one is not changing years from previous applications. This deduction here, activity not related to the quality standard, is the most common, or not most common, sorry, is new this year. So this will be one that we haven't had to mark for deductions before, but a lot of people in the past have wanted to mark for deductions. So that's why the National Committee decided to add this deduction, and we actually removed 2 deductions from our deductions list to be able to add this deduction there. So the idea is the activity not being related to the quality standard. So the goal of this is every activity is going to be identified under some quality indicator, whether it's leadership, personal growth, environmental, healthy lifestyles, agricultural advocacy, ag literacy, whatever it is. So previously speaking, the only part of the application that really correlated or related to the quality standard was that little 4-point piece that said related to quality standard. But there are some ideas that when you're writing about a activity and you'd be reading it, be like, God, they're writing about this officer retreat as a environmental activity, and they did nothing outside. They did nothing with the environment. They didn't do anything about teaching about how to become better stewards of the environment. Okay, that would be an example of an activity that would not relate to the quality standard. Probably one of the more common ones that you might see is when chapters try to write about doing an activity or an event with your alumni and supporters chapter under the stakeholder engagement quality standard. Specifically in the quality indicators on the program of activities, it does specifically state that the alumni and supporters chapter cannot be considered as a stakeholder for your stakeholder engagement there. So if you do not believe that the activity does not meet that quality standard as you're reading it, what's been recommended is that you flag it for your deduction, and then you also give a 0 point value in the related to the quality portion of the rubric there. So those three are the three main deductions that you'll see at the state of Illinois, or even on the national level. What I would recommend as you guys are going through and judging and flagging for deductions, if you happen to see a deduction or you think you see a deduction, all you need to do is flag that deduction on AET, but still judge the application accordingly to the rubric. The deductions committee will be able to look at the deductions that are flagged, and those then that committee will make the final decision on what a deduction is or what is not. So you still need to score that rubric in its entirety. So if you think there's a deduction, what we're asking you to do is when Mindy sends out your individual judges link or your code to be able to log into AET, you will come up with a list of all the different chapters that you are assigned to judge. And then you'll see a little post-it note sign next to each area there that you can be able to click on it and type in a note saying, I think multiple activities in one for the deduction on this activity. And once you click out of it, it automatically saves. And that way the deductions committee will be able to see where comments have been made, and we can go back and reanalyze those activities there. So the goal is that you are not awarding the deduction itself, and is rather to be safe on the safe side and just flag something if there's a question for the deductions committee to look at it. But the deductions committee themselves will be the ones that will actually assign the point value lost there. Questions on the deductions process? Mindy, do you want to take over the screen to be able to show them what the post-it note looks like in case they haven't judged on AET before?
I can do that. Let me just get logged into it first, so you don't have to watch me do all that.
No problem.
And share screen. Okay, so can you see it now, buddy?
Not yet. Now we can.
Okay. So what it'll look like, these are applications, actually state FFA degree applications, but what it will look like, you can see where I have typed in an A here. That is where it will be for you. And all you have to do is click on the little pencil mark right there. And then you can type in anything you want to for that application, any reason why you think it should be deducted. And then Buddy is actually one of the deductions judges, 2 areas in 1. Be as descriptive as you can be, but then, oh, sorry about that. So then it'll show right there that there's a note, and then they'll be able to see that note. And I can click on Connor and I can see the notes are right there. And again, I will take those notes off so that it isn't there for him. But I use that process for myself. This is what we had the reviewers do for the state degree process. They put their notes there, and then I could see those whenever they would pop up.
Thank you very much. And
Yep,
again,
so that's exactly what it's going to look like for you when you have your applications as well.
Very true. So again, if there's any questions about what you have as potentially a deduction, my rule of thumb is always it'd be better just to flag it as a deduction and let the committee make the final decision, then rather than trying to wait and stress yourself out trying to make a decision there. So if anything comes into question, go ahead and flag it, and they'll be perfectly fine there. Can you guys see my screen right now? Minnie, can you see my screen by chance?
Yes, I can. Yes, I
Thank you,
can.
ma'am. I appreciate that.
Yep,
Last
sorry
but
about
not
that.
least, that's okay. Last thing, I know we went through a lot of stuff here in the almost an hour, and I was trying to go as quickly and concisely as possible. So are there any questions from those of you guys online right now for the greater good? Okay. If not, you can still go ahead and type those into the chat whenever you want. I did post my email here, buddy.haas@central301.net. Again, I'll be available all throughout round 1 as well as round 2 judging to be able to help answer questions. Or if you want to email Mindy there as well, and she'll be able to do our best to be able to help answer those questions there too. Again, as a reminder, we'll make sure that this presentation is shared with you guys. So that way you'll be able to take a look and see like the different examples that we have here. I do have hyperlinked in here, the rubric, the quality indicators, as well as kind of a cheat sheet for the deductions. So that way you can have, like, if you want one of those types of people that want to print out a document to have next to you while you're judging it, you can have it there as well. So again, if there are no other questions for the greater good, that is all I got for you guys today. So again, thank you guys for taking time out of your day and listening to me ramble on for a little bit here about that.
Do you have any questions for me about the process or what area you're judging or anything in that realm or in that nature?
Anytime, Paxton, anytime.
Thanks so much, buddy. We'll get so buddy, you'll have the recording, right? Because you saved it to the cloud and you'll send me that link and then I can send that to all the judges.
Yep, we can do it. I'm
All
gonna
right.
go ahead and stop recording.
All right. Thanks everybody for